It was nearly midnight in Cebu, but Maribel Cruz wasn't tired. She sat at the edge of her shared bed, her two young sons asleep beside her, snoring softly in the humid dark. Her mother was in the next room, fanning herself with a paper flyer from the local bakery. The ceiling fan clicked overhead, tired, slow, barely moving the air. Maribel stared at the glow of her phone screen, her thumb slowly scrolling through profiles on a dating site designed for foreign matches. American men, older ones, lonely ones, the kind that needed a reason to feel important. She had done her research. She knew all about the Violence Against Women Act. She had read the blogs, the forums, the Reddit threads where women swapped stories. Some whispered in shame, others typed with a twisted pride. Marry him, move there, call the police once he raises his voice. Instant protection, instant status, citizenship in under a year. The key was crafting the right story and finding the right man. Maribel was 25, with smooth skin and doe-like eyes that turned desperate when she tilted her head just right. She had perfected the role, the devoted single mother working hard to support her children, dreaming of a life in America, of a kind man who would love her for who she was, who would help her build a better life. She'd played that part a dozen times online, but none of the men had been exactly right. Too young, too skeptical, too broke. Until tonight. His name was Walter Briggs, 62, Ohio, widowed, retired from the post office. No kids, no ex-wife in the picture, just a modest pension, a paid-off home, and a profile full of short, simple sentences. Looking for someone real. Love doesn't care about borders. I'm a man who still believes in forever. Bingo. Maribel clicked on his photos, plain man, graying beard, tucked-in shirts, warm eyes. A man who had known loneliness too long and was still naive enough to believe that love could arrive in his inbox. She crafted her message slowly. Hi, Walter. My name is Maribel. I don't know if someone like me deserves your attention, but I just wanted to say, your smile made me feel safe. And in this world, that's rare. I hope you don't mind my honesty. I'm just a simple woman with 2 children and a big heart. She hit send, then whispered to herself, You're going to take me to America, Walter. She didn't know what he looked like when he read her message hours later, but she imagined him smiling, maybe even whispering her name. And she smiled too, because she had just found her ticket out. Walter Briggs sat at his kitchen table, the early morning sun creeping through the blinds as he stirred a lukewarm cup of instant coffee. He scrolled absently through his dating site inbox, not expecting much. He never did. Most of the messages he got were either generic copy-pastes or obvious scams. Girls half his age, with profiles full of borrowed glamour and words like dearest and beloved. But then he saw it. Maribel. Her message wasn't like the others. It was soft, humble, sweet. The grammar wasn't perfect, but that only made it feel more genuine. She hadn't thrown herself at him. She simply noticed him. His smile, his warmth. It had been years since anyone noticed anything about him. He clicked on her profile. 25. Cebu City, Philippines. 2 sons. No mention of a father. A few modest pictures, one holding her youngest in a blue plastic chair, another in a floral dress outside what looked like a church. Her eyes were full of light and weariness. It hit him harder than he expected. He wrote her back right away. Hi, Maribel. Thank you for your kind message. You seem like a very thoughtful woman, and I'd like to get to know you. Tell me more about your boys. What are their names? I've never been to the Philippines, but I'd love to learn. He paused, then added, You're not undeserving of attention, not in the slightest. Maribel read his reply with a slow, careful smile. That was easier than expected. She answered quickly, Walter, thank you so much for saying that. I'm crying as I type this because it's been so long since someone made me feel seen. My boys are Levi, 7, and Jordan, 4. They're my world. I work long hours just to feed them, but I thank God every day that we have each other. I don't have much, but I have love, and I believe that's more powerful than money. Walter read her message 3 times. Something inside him stirred. Nostalgia, maybe. or hope. They began exchanging messages daily. Then came the phone calls. Her voice was soft and lilting, her laugh pure. She'd ask about his day, call him sweetheart, and listen without interrupting. He told her about his wife, the cancer, the empty holidays. She told him about the floods that washed through her neighborhood last year and how Levi needed new shoes. He offered to send money. She declined at first, modestly, almost ashamed, but when he insisted, she relented. The first transfer was $80 for school uniforms, then $150 for groceries, then $250 for a doctor visit her youngest didn't really need. Each time, she cried. Each time, she called him her blessing. And each time Walter felt more deeply connected to her than he ever had with anyone since his wife. He told his neighbor he was falling in love. He told himself he was finally starting over. What he didn't know was that the woman on the other end of the line was already laying bricks for the next phase. She didn't want love. She wanted leverage. Maribel sat on the edge of her bed with a practiced tremble in her voice as she spoke to Walter over the phone. The video was off tonight, just the way she wanted it. He couldn't see her eyes shift when she lied, only hear the emotion she let drip through the line like honey. "I hate asking you this," she whispered, "but I had to choose between rent and food this week. My mother is sick, and the boys, they need vitamins." Walter didn't hesitate. "I'll send something right now. I don't want you or the boys to go without, Maribel." She bit her lip and whispered a soft, "Thank you, sweetheart," then hung up the phone. $300. Just like that. Easy. She looked over at her mother, who sat cross-legged on a thin mattress, folding laundry and pretending not to hear. "Does he believe it?" her mother asked quietly. Maribel smiled. "Of course he does. He wants to save us." The money kept flowing. Small requests at first, medicine, shoes, utility bills. Then came the visa questions. She brought them up slowly, like she was afraid to speak the thought aloud. "I was reading online about couples who fall in love long distance," she said on a call one night. "Some of them apply for a K-1 visa, to see if their relationship is real." Walter was quiet. Then, "You've been the best part of my life in years, Maribel. If that's something you want, I'll do it." She closed her eyes, hiding her grin. "I just want to be by your side. I'd never ask for anything that didn't bring us closer." But behind her words, the plan was already unfolding. She joined Facebook groups for Filipinas who had moved to the U.S. through fiancé visas, listened, studied, took notes. One story stood out. A woman who married an American, claimed abuse, filed under the VW self-petition, and was granted legal status after only 6 months. No husband needed, just the right kind of story. Maribel started shaping hers. She began saving text threads, nothing suspicious yet, just everyday conversations with Walter that could later be framed as controlling or emotionally manipulative if needed. She took screenshots, backed up voicemails, journaled fake stories about outbursts that never happened. Then she started planting ideas. "I know some girls move to the U.S. and their partners change," she said one night. "They become mean, controlling. I hope you'd never become like that." Walter was horrified. "Of course not. I'd never hurt you." "I know," she whispered. "You're not like other men." The next morning, he wired her $1,200 to begin the visa process. In Cebu, Maribel used $100 of it and pocketed the rest. She stared at herself in the mirror that night. Pretty, innocent, fragile, everything he wanted to protect, everything he'd soon regret. She whispered to her reflection, "A few more months." Then softly added, "And then I'll be free." Maribel adjusted the earbuds in her ears as the video call connected. The screen flickered for a second before it settled on Raphael, lounging on a couch in a small apartment just outside Los Angeles. Behind him, the TV played low, and a fan buzzed in the background. He looked good, too good. No shirt, just a thin chain resting against his chest, a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the coffee table beside him. She grinned. "You look lazy." He laughed. "You look dangerous. That poor old man doesn't stand a chance." Maribel sat outside on her porch, the late-night heat clinging to her skin. She kept her voice low. Her mother was just inside with the boys. "I told you," she said. "Walter's a sweet old man, lonely, and rich enough to get me on a plane." Raphael leaned forward, his tone shifting slightly. "You sure he's not going to catch on?" She shook her head. "He's already planning our life together. Talks about what color curtains I'd like, what we'll cook for dinner. It's sad, really. He thinks I'm some kind of reward for surviving grief." "Better him than me," Raphael muttered, sitting back. "I told you I wasn't about to file paperwork. I love you, but I'm not getting locked into that." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm doing this." Raphael studied her face through the screen. "And after the accusation?" "I file the report. Say he yelled, shoved me. I cry. Immigration steps in. I get the protection visa, then the restraining order. Then I'm out." "And then?" She smiled. "Then I come to you." Raphael smirked devilishly. "This country's about to look a lot better." "You'll come pick me up?" she asked. "I'll be waiting outside the courthouse if I have to." She sighed, soft and satisfied. "You better not change your mind." He pointed at her through the screen. "You better not get too used to that old man's house. I'm not about to be your second choice." Maribel rolled her eyes. "You're the only choice. Walter is a visa, that's all." They talked for another half-hour. Jokes, flirting, promises. And when she finally hung up, she opened her inbox. Walter had sent a message, complete with a screenshot of the visa packet in progress. "I'm working on getting everything ready for you, my angel. It won't be long now." Maribel stared at the screen, her lips curling. Soon, she thought. Very soon. And everything she wanted would be in reach. Walter stood at the arrivals gate at LAX with a small bouquet of pink carnations in his hand and his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't been this nervous since his wedding day, decades ago. The digital screen above him flashed international arrivals. He checked it every 2 minutes, even though the flight from Manila had already landed. Then he saw her. Maribel. Slim, delicate, eyes wide with pretend awe. Her long, dark hair flowed behind her, and her steps slowed when she spotted him, like she wanted to make the moment last. He stepped forward, smile stretching across his tired face. "There she is," he whispered, voice catching. She embraced him sweetly, just long enough to seem sincere. "Walter," she breathed into his shoulder, "you really came." "Of course I did." He gave her the flowers. She acted like they were diamonds. That night, back at his modest suburban home, Maribel explored the house with the reverence of someone entering a new world. She ran her fingers over the furniture, smiled at the refrigerator magnets, took a long shower, and cried just loud enough for him to hear. Walter watched her with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "She's been through so much," he told himself. But Maribel wasn't looking at the house. She was taking inventory. Closets, locks, exit points, cameras. She made a mental note of everything. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly retirees. No nosy neighbors. Perfect. She slept in his bed that night. Chaste, sweet. She said she was nervous and still adjusting. Walter, ever the gentleman, respected her space. She curled beside him in a t-shirt and whispered things like, "Thank you for saving me," and "I've never felt so safe." And he believed her. Over the next few weeks, Maribel played the perfect immigrant bride. She cooked, cleaned, smiled at the neighbors, video called her kids every evening. Walter bought her a phone, opened a bank account, added her to his health insurance. He even started talking about marriage. She waited for the right time, slowly letting her joy dull into stress. She'd startle when he touched her shoulder, flinch when he raised his voice at the TV. She kept a journal, full of fake entries. "He shouted at me today about the dishes. I was so scared I locked myself in the bathroom. He called me useless. I cried all night." One night, while Walter was asleep, she staged a fall in the kitchen, bruised her own arm, took pictures. 2 days later, she went to the police station. She left with a pamphlet, a case number, and a restraining order. When Walter came home that afternoon, his front door was wide open. The police were waiting. "Mr. Briggs," one of them said, "we need to speak with you regarding allegations made by Ms. Cruz." Walter's face went pale. "What?" But Maribel didn't even look at him. She was already packing. A taxi waited outside. Inside the cab, she texted Raphael, "It's done. I'll be with you in a few days." Raphael replied instantly, "Told you, you're brilliant." Maribel looked out the window as Walter's house disappeared behind her. She didn't cry. Not this time. She had made it. But what she didn't know was that Walter wasn't finished, and that heartbreak can turn even the gentlest men into something dangerous. Walter sat in his quiet, hollow home 2 days after Maribel disappeared with the police report in his hands and disbelief rotting in his chest. Accused of emotional abuse, repeated verbal aggression, unsafe living environment. It didn't sound like him. It wasn't him. She'd been sweet, gentle, grateful, until she wasn't. The accusations hit harder than any slap could have, not because of what they said, but because of what they revealed. She had never loved him. The bruises, he hadn't touched her. The journal entries, fabricated. The sudden shift from affection to fear, a performance. The reality was settling in now, cold and cruel. She used him. He poured nearly $14,000 into the visa process, another $3,000 to help her mother and sons, and opened his home, his heart, his future. And she left with a suitcase and a lie. Walter did what any man whose life had been stolen might do. He opened his laptop and typed, "Private investigator, Los Angeles area, immigration fraud." The man he hired was former military, quiet, observant, efficient, Ray Decker. Walter handed over every document, every email, every chat log, every screenshot, the receipts, the police report, even the small details, how Maribel flinched near the end, how she'd gone from loving to distant overnight. "I want the truth," Walter said. "All of it." Ray nodded. "You're not the first." Within 2 weeks, the report was in his hands, and it was worse than he imagined. Maribel had been messaging a man named Rafael Torres while still in the Philippines. Rafael had an address in Van Nuys, a criminal history for petty theft and illegal firearms possession. Surveillance placed Maribel entering Rafael's apartment just 4 days after filing her report against Walter. Her immigration paperwork had already been updated. She was no longer listed as dependent. She'd filed a VAWA self-petition and was now seeking work authorization. And most damning, photos. One showed Maribel on Rafael's lap outside a taco shop. Another, her hand in his, a shopping bag swinging between them. A third, taken 2 nights ago, showed her unlocking his apartment door with her key. Ray placed the file on the table. "She's yours to decide." Walter said nothing for a long time. Then, without looking up, he asked quietly, "Can you get me the address?" Ray nodded once. Walter leaned back, hands folded, eyes hollow. The house was silent, but inside him something terrible had awakened. Not rage, not heartbreak. Purpose. Walter hadn't felt this alive in years, not since before his wife's illness, not since before the long nights of grief, the hollow months of silence. He thought love had returned when Maribel entered his life, but it hadn't been love. It had been bait. Now he moved with a different kind of clarity. He drove west under the cover of early morning fog, his truck packed with a small duffel bag, just clothes, a burner phone, a disposable camera, a pair of gloves, and something sealed in a metal case beneath the passenger seat. He didn't fly. That would leave too many records. He paid cash at every gas station, stayed off major highways, and crossed into California unnoticed. The address Ray Decker gave him led to a worn-down apartment complex in Van Nuys. Concrete buildings sun-faded and chipping. Graffiti along the dumpster walls, a rusted gate that no longer locked. Unit 2B, third window from the left. He didn't go near it. Not yet. He parked 2 blocks away and walked the neighborhood for 3 nights, watching their movements. Maribel didn't work, at least not formally. She left in the late mornings and returned with groceries or food containers. Sometimes she took phone calls on the balcony, her Tagalog words quick and sharp. She always laughed with Rafael. And Raphael? He strutted. Tight shirts, loud music. He walked like a man who thought he'd won something. Walter didn't flinch when he saw them kiss. Didn't blink when he watched her rest her head on Raphael's shoulder. The same shoulder she used to cry into and thank him for saving her life. She hadn't just used him. She had thrown him away. He waited for the right moment. On the 5th night, he watched Raphael leave alone. Maribel stayed behind, alone. Walter drove to a hardware store 20 minutes away and purchased what he needed. Gloves, tape, a lock-picking tool, a crowbar, just in case. That night, he sat in the motel room with the lights off, the duffel open, the weapon in front of him. A clean pistol. 1 bullet loaded. Not because he wanted to cause a scene, but because he wanted it done with certainty. He stared at the weapon, his fingers calm around the grip. Not rage, not vengeance, balance. In the stillness, he whispered to no one, "I gave you everything." Then he stood up, zipped the bag, and checked the time. 2:47 a.m. She'd be asleep by now. It was time. The apartment complex was silent, the kind of silence that only falls in the dead of night, when even the sirens sleep and the city forgets its sins. Walter stood outside Unit 2B wearing a dark hoodie, gloves on, duffel slung over his shoulder. He picked the lock with practiced hands, not from experience, but from obsession. He'd practiced it over and over again in his motel room, on a salvaged door from a junkyard. The click was soft. The door creaked open. Inside, it smelled like cheap incense and fried food. One lamp glowed dimly in the living room, casting shadows on the cluttered floor. Empty takeout boxes, a half-finished bottle of wine, her heels tossed by the couch. He walked in, slow and steady. The bedroom door was cracked open. She lay there, tangled in the sheets, one leg draped over Raphael's side of the bed, though Raphael was gone. Her long hair spilled across the pillow, face calm, lips slightly parted. Maribel. She looked peaceful. He wondered if she ever looked that peaceful while sleeping beside him. He stepped to the edge of the bed, staring down at her. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She didn't scream, not yet. She blinked a few times, confused, her eyes adjusting to the dark. Then they widened. "Walter!" He raised the gun. She gasped and backed into the headboard, yanking the sheet up. What are you? You can't be here." His voice was low, steady, cold. "You lied." She shook her head rapidly. "You need to leave. Raphael will be back." "Exactly," he cut in. "And I want him to see you. Just like this." "Please," she whispered. "We can talk. I loved you," he said, stepping closer. "I gave up everything, and you left me in the street like garbage." Her lips trembled. "I had no choice. You had a choice. You chose him." He stared at her for a long moment, then raised the gun again. She reached out instinctively, desperate. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But Walter didn't blink. One shot, clean, sharp, final. She collapsed into the pillows, the sheets darkening beneath her. He stood there a moment longer, breathing in the silence. Then, calm and methodical, he walked to the dresser, pulled out her immigration paperwork, her USCS approval letters, the fake journal she used to accuse him. He soaked them in cooking oil, then lit them on fire in the kitchen sink. The fire alarm blared as he slipped out the door, already back in the hoodie, walking calmly to his truck 2 blocks away. He didn't look back. By the time Raphael returned and found her, the smoke would be clearing. The police would come. The fire would be blamed for the damage. Maybe they'd think it was a robbery. Maybe not. But Walter knew one thing. The lie ended where it began, with her. The fire department arrived 11 minutes after the call. By then, the smoke had poured out of the second-floor unit's windows. The flames hadn't spread far, but what they revealed sent shockwaves through the quiet Van Nuys neighborhood. A young Filipina woman found dead in bed, a single gunshot wound, no witnesses, no sign of forced entry. Raphael was hysterical, shouting at the paramedics, yelling that he had just left for a beer run, that she was alive when he left, that he didn't know anyone who would want her dead. The police weren't so sure. The apartment was burned enough to obscure the details, fingerprints smudged, papers turned to ash. But they still found signs. A scorched envelope of immigration paperwork, scraps of a journal partially melted in the sink, and a single bullet casing lodged beneath the bed. It wasn't a robbery, it was personal. Raphael was held for questioning. But there was no motive, no weapon, and no trail to follow. The only name that surfaced was Walter Briggs. But Walter Briggs was gone. His truck was found weeks later in Arizona, abandoned at a bus terminal. He had paid cash, no camera footage, no trail. It was like he had evaporated into the desert. The case stayed open, for a time, but the world moved on. 6 months later, somewhere along the Oregon coast, an old man named Earl Turner lived in a cabin with a view of the ocean. He kept to himself, wore gloves when shopping, paid rent in cash, drove a beater pickup with out-of-state plates. The locals didn't ask questions. He was quiet, kind, always tipped well, said he used to be a mailman back east. Every morning, Earl walked to the edge of the shore, stared out at the waves, and whispered something only the wind could carry. Sometimes it was a name, sometimes it was nothing, but always there was peace. Because justice hadn't come in the courtroom. It had come by his own hand. And for Walter Briggs, that was enough. The end.